Hello, all, and welcome back to our look at Mortal Kombat 9. This is the episode that's going to finish it all off. We pick up where we last left off, which was with the supposed death of Shao Kahn and the second victory of Liu Kang, who is unfortunately now in mourning for his lost friend, but he still did pick up Kitana and has taken her to Earthrealm. They've also got Jade on their side. And supposedly, Earthrealm is safe forever from Outworld's depredations. So the good guys have won, again, in a big way. Seemingly, this solves all of their problems. And our story fixates on the immediate aftermath. That's where we're going to pick up. Where you have the Outworlders who are arguing about who should rule after Shao Kahn. And this gives us some interesting insight into the politics of Outworld, something that we don't really see or haven't seen much of in the games up to now, and don't really dive into in full until Mortal Kombat X. Still, this is a groundwork we're going to start from before we get to X. And whether this is by accident or on purpose, the creators have come up with a logical political structure for Outworld. Outworld is a cratocracy. It's where the strong rule over the weak, and they do so because they're strong. What it is more, it is a dictatorship with only one ruler figure at the top. It's not a monarchy. Shao Kahn didn't inherit it by birth or blood, he inherited it by killing someone else. So violence is the principal road to power in Outworld. What is more, Shao Kahn is immortal, so is there really any need to have a system of succession set up? The answer is no. He wouldn't have prepared for this, especially since he is so self-oriented. He is out to conquer. That is his goal. And he's not doing it for some future generation. He's doing it for his own pride and power, and potentially because of the influence of Shinnok and or the One Being. Why would a guy who is convinced of his own superiority and is conquering only for himself, not really planning progressively for a future, actually come up with a solid system of succession? Now, he refers to Melina as his heir at certain points, presumably to have her fulfill a function as his child, but there is no seeming plan for her to eventually take over in any of the games. And certainly there doesn't seem to be a widespread expectation of her getting the throne here, especially since she is a construct that was just born and basically has the mind of a child. Kitana was heir to the throne of Outworld and of Edenia, but no one is considering going to her to hand it over. They're not doing what some monarchies in the past had to do when it came to bringing people of the proper bloodline or line of succession back out of exile because something happened to the previous ruler. That's not what's going on here. And again, this sort of chaos is predictable if you study real-world dictatorships where all power is centralized into one figure and there is no plan for what happens after that figure goes. Even the first emperor of Rome, Augustus, previously known as Octavius, was effectively the emperor, but the succession crisis that came after him, despite all of this planning and finagling, since he couldn't call himself a proper king, he had to finagle it other ways, none of which held up, and the succession crisis would haunt emperors ever afterwards. And that is what's going on here. There are two parties that seem to be the ones with the most sway in the room when we come to it. They are Melina and Shang Tsung. Shang Tsung wants power because, well, he's the most influential in the room left. He is seemingly the most powerful, save for perhaps Ermac. And he is a sorcerer with a long history of privileged position, even though recently he's been on a bit of a losing streak. He also seems to be one of the only ones in the room with such knowledge of the Emperor's dark arts, so it's conceivable that since necromancy and sorcery have been involved in the rulership of Outworld to some degree, since Onaga and then later Shao Kahn and now Shang Tsung, that there is some logic there. But he's also just lost big. He's treacherous, he's slimy, no one trusts him, and he doesn't seem to have forged very good patron relations with anyone besides maybe Reptile, who needs him to recreate the Zaterran race. And Reptile doesn't seem to be that interested here in supporting Shang Tsung, at least not as we see. Shiva doesn't seem to take a firm stance here. Baraka is seemingly loyal to Melina, which is interesting. He recognizes Melina as his proper leader figure because she's Shao Kahn's heir. Now, nowhere in Tarkatan society that we learn of in the games, this one or in future games, is there any sign that they are actually monarchical. The leaders of Tarkatans are based on strength as well, and Shao Kahn gained their loyalty because he defeated them and absorbed their realm. The monarchical societies in Outworld seem to be Edenia and the subterranean realm of the Shokan, both of which pass on leadership through families, as in the case of Goro, though since Shiva rises to power, we see there are other ways as well. And the Edenians are purely monarchical, as far as I can tell. So the Tarkatans seem to be able to recognize the monarchical system in other societies, and since Melina is part Edenian, maybe he recognizes that Edenian succession system, making his loyalty to Shao Kahn pass to her. Or maybe he's supporting her because there's Tarkatan in her. Whatever, he claims that she is the proper heir because she's Shao Kahn's daughter. Ermac, not really someone who could be in charge, even though, besides Shang Tsung, he's probably the most powerful in the room. And they seem to be squaring up to divide along these battle lines or haven't picked a side before Shao Kahn comes back into the room, wounded, but still alive. Now, no one takes the chance to try and overpower him, presumably because he's still got loyal subjects in that room, and they're a little shocked that he is still alive, despite having a whole hand, a flaming hand, shoved through his chest. Well, Shao Kahn is a little bit PO'd because he's lost Earthrealm again, and this seems like it's going to be the last time. However, Quan Chi has a solution for him, and that is to break down the barrier that Sindel created between the realms. He argues that the Mortal Kombat tournament is really just a game set down by the Elder Gods that has no power, and that the real barrier this whole time has been Sindel's curse. Now, why the Mortal Kombat tournament would have circumvented Sindel's curse is never made clear. Maybe with the Elder Gods' permission they could have broken it, or the Elder Gods' power could have gotten rid of it. I don't know. But either way, it seems that this solidifies that the Elder Gods are toothless worms, as Shao Kahn later describes them, and are not really going to do much of anything. What's more, this is something that Quan Chi is seemingly able to deliver on. He and Noob pop off to go do this, resurrect her, brainwash her, make her villainous, and she declares with an evil cackle that Kitana is no longer her daughter and to bring her to Shao Kahn. Now in Mortal Kombat 9, both in the latter ending and, as far as we can tell in the game, Sindel was a good queen before she was twisted by Quan Chi upon resurrection. So much so that she was willing to sacrifice herself to protect another realm that she has no loyalty to in a moment of selflessness to prevent it from falling to the same depredations that Edenia had. This becomes a problem with some of NetherRealm's retcons later on in Mortal Kombat 11. While NetherRealm and its previous studio that held Mortal Kombat's license both wrote in several new retcons as they went, and even Mortal Kombat 9 has several retcons. For the most part, they're relatively minor, don't necessarily really change too much, or add more depth to things that hadn't really made all that clear. So for the most part, they tend to add things to the story rather than create more conflict. But here you have a very serious problem. If the entire reason that there is an issue with invading Earthrealm isn't because of the Elder Gods, it's because of Sindel, how can we later say that she was always evil, truly loved Shao Kahn, and she never would have created that barrier? Did Quan Chi create that barrier? Why? How would he have that power? It's not even stated later that he was the one that made that barrier. What has all of this been for? And this is one of those retcons that proves frustrating to a lot of players, because it doesn't make sense within the story. Yeah, I actually like evil Sindel better than good Sindel, and I was glad that she was the Wicked Queen in 11, up until I realized what it meant for the story, and then I went, oh, this really messes with everything. This is terrible writing, truly terrible, and there's no clear line of motivation, cause, effect. It's just a mess. This is a case of a retcon messing with the previous story in such a way as to make it completely nonsensical. This is a writing no-no. Do not do it. Anyway, with Shao Kahn back in power and Sindel ready to go, we have the invasion all set. What is more, Shao Kahn is going to later kill Shang Tsung, preventing future treachery, and use Shang Tsung's many souls to empower Sindel. That's going to be important later. And then we jump into the invasion with our first chapter of the final arc, and that is Curtis Strikers. Now, Stryker is one of those characters that was really helped out by Mortal Kombat 9. His previous version in Mortal Kombat 3 and Ultimate and his later incarnations weren't all that impressive. He started out as a cop that looked like he's had too many donuts and is partly out of uniform, and only got marginally more impressive from there by Armageddon. He never stood out in the story. He didn't even function all that well as an everyman because he was just so boring, and there was really nothing noteworthy about him. In this, he is basically rescued from being the dull character that doesn't matter to being the normal guy in one hell of a situation. Now, we've already done variations of the everyman throughout the story, with people like Johnny Cage and Sonya. Stryker, however, is even more down-to-earth than either of them. He's not a big Hollywood celebrity, nor is he someone with special forces training. He's just a cop, doing his job, and he has got to outfight, outthink, and outdo every single thing Outworld can throw his way. Also, he doesn't work like the traditional everyman in that the audience has already become familiar with the world of Outworld and magic and Netherrealm and all of these other things. So we don't need someone to explain something to Stryker for us to understand. We'll be seeing Stryker learn things that we already know, so we're reversing that traditional everyman role. Still, this allows us a sense of superiority as we watch him go through it, allowing us to find some humor, maybe even some amazement in how he deals with it. He also is a great way to let us see the heart of the conflict, because as a New York SWAT officer, he'd be at ground zero, so we can see the worst of the worst. We're not going off in the middle of nowhere and seeing a few bums that are like, hey, I hear there's an invasion going on in New York. Really? Yeah, no one cares. Okay, well, fry that wiener. Yes, if magic aliens from another world invaded New York and probably the rest of Earthrealm, people would be panicking, but there are probably places that would be a lot more boring to watch than at the heart of the invasion. We also get to see from his perspective what it's like to face magic, what it's like to face giant monsters who can basically act as tanks and shock troopers, and all the other things that world has brought to bear. Humans have been practicing warfare for a very long time. We're pretty damn good at it. But we have certain expectations of our opponents. We have certain expectations of human limitation, that their technology is roughly similar to our own, and that there are logistical lines that we can count on. An enemy that can teleport from their world that you cannot counterattack brings in monsters that can counter your best technology as magic that doesn't follow the rules of reality as you understand it. It's going to flummox you even if you have some great advantages. And it's the fact that this everyman proves unflappable that puts him right up there with characters like Batman, who it's not the money, it's not the skill, it's the will that really sets them apart. And you want to be like them. And it works here. So we get a shot of him and another character who's going to be important later, Cabal, who was a former member of the Black Dragon, both acting as SWAT officers, calling in emergency rescue and trying to report what they see from a skyscraper, trying to be the eyes in the sky, I suppose. And since it's not that safe to be a chopper in the air, as we can see from this game, Probably this is the most intelligence you're going to get aside from perhaps satellite view, and it's a little bit more real time and on the spot. Now I'm going to pause here and question NetherRealm's grip on reality. This is a game where the rule of cool is pretty much the rule of everything, but how is a former terrorist, black market dealer, and professional killer for hire, as far as I can tell, get a job as a SWAT officer? I really couldn't tell. There is no sign that Stryker is surprised that Cabal can use those Chinese swords, or that Cabal was involved with the Black Dragon at all. In fact, we don't seem to see much that suggests Cabal was Black Dragon mentioned in front of Stryker, even though we see in Cabal's chapter he definitely was Black Dragon. So, how? Does Stryker already know? Do the people that hired Cabal already know? Is Cabal just an alias? I mean, Cabal doesn't sound like something that a mother would name her kid. Or maybe, and this is what I think, Cabal is the name that the character, who was previously named something else, the artist formerly known as not Cabal, Cabal is the name he picked for this new identity. And he used this new identity to get a job with the police so that he can make up for the ills that he has perpetrated. There is no way a police force would adopt a mass murderer into their SWAT unit. Now, let's say he were to turn state's evidence and get one of the best deals possible, he'd still go into witness protection, not into a frontline police SWAT unit. So I find it unlikely that the police are aware of his history. Stryker might know, but even that is not made clear. Still, he's here, and they seem to have a pretty good relationship. NetherRealm doesn't have much time to sell that they're buddies, but their banter and the fact that they pause to worry about each other, which is more than we see from a lot of characters in this game, seems to indicate that they're pretty close. So, we get to join them on a rooftop where they eventually become prey for the local wildlife of Outworld. Reptile is the first fight that they have to deal with, and I think that he works as a pretty good startup. While there is no previous story between Reptile and these characters, the fact that there's an invasion going on and Outworld would naturally be one of the vanguard of it fits well enough. Reptile is also really strange compared to the things that these two guys have likely seen, so he's a good introduction to the weird while building up to some of the weirder, crazier, and more powerful stuff in a sort of escalation that's going to work very well for this chapter. We also get to see Reptile pull out a new trick that we hadn't seen before, and I would love to see this make it into the game. His acid can block bullets by melting them, and he can form it as a cloud around himself or a mist. That's nice. Well, we have to have him face off against our police officer, and the police officer manages to beat him down, and they realize that a rooftop in an invasion may not be the best place to be, so they go to ground level, where we have a rather amusing scene where they see Melina, a semi-naked chick, in the middle of all this chaos, and they go, friend or foe? Stryker, proving a little bit more genre savvy than the average person, goes foe. Definitely foe. And Melina's as crazy as ever. Again, she's another bit of insanity from Outworld that would just be very out of place and be hard for a normal person to deal with. She teleports instead of spitting acid, but it's still something that Stryker can seemingly handle. Then we get a massive escalation with Kintaro, which is alright, it works pretty well, and Kintaro adds to the narrative by burning Cabal, which is largely the only thing that Kintaro does that matters to the overall story arc. He helps create Cabal as the character we recognize him. As for Motaro, we never really get to see him fight, presumably because he would have been too hard to program moves for and animate. He gets killed off rather quickly because Raiden realized that he was going to kill Johnny Cage. In fact, the whole story stops so that you have Stryker and Cabal going, Johnny Cage fighting a monster? What is this? Is this a movie? Which is a reasonable reaction. Anyway, we jump back to the whole thing with Kentaro. Before Stryker can aid his wounded compatriot, he gets yanked into the subway tunnels where he has to face off against Ermac, the most magically dangerous of the Outworld foes he faces. The reason I think Ermac is a good choice for the boss of this little chapter is because magic is the principal advantage of Outworld. It's the only thing that they have that Earthrealm doesn't. Sure, they have monsters, but Earthrealm's got some pretty wacky people its own self. And yeah, there's a guy that spits acid and a crazy girl that can teleport, but nothing is quite on the level of Ermac. Well, you have Stryker lay down the old pummel and serve, and Ermac is defeated. Then, of course, Nightwolf shows up and recruits Stryker to the group. Now, Nightwolf seems to be the second in command of Raiden's forces, but we don't really see him get to do too much in that role. He doesn't get to lead more than he ends up having to fight later. And I would have liked to have seen more from him in that bit. They're trying to give him a bigger role, but they just won't give him the screen time to do it. Now Stryker goes, hey, where's Cabal? We gotta do something, but they don't end up doing anything, and that passed rather quickly. So, a bit of a meh way to end there. Still, we get to jump into Cabal's chapter. Now, Cabal is a completely different type of character. He is someone who is a repentant villain, and he is someone who will view himself physically as a monster. He's one of those people who gets special powers, but at a horrific price. And he continually refers to himself as something that should not exist. So we have these two archetypical ideas that get combined here. And I find it interesting that there's a bit of an inversion between the two. As he becomes the good guy, he also transitions to a more physically ugly form. Whereas when he was Black Dragon, he presumably looked alright, but was spiritually ugly. So there is a bit of a transfer there. Anyway, we also see that Kano is capable of, to some degree, caring about somebody, even if that care only comes in the form of, hey, I want to kill more people with you. I suppose that means he does have a form of camaraderie or affection for another human being, even if he is completely psychotic. Note that this won't stop him from trying to kill Cabal later. And he builds Cabal a respirator to help with his burned lungs, and builds Cabal a mask from what I presume are parts of Lin Kuei Robo Ninjas. It is technology he had on hand, and he uses magic, or has Shang Tsung do some magic, to help repair Cabal. He then revives Cabal and gives him back those hook swords, saying, let's let it be like the old times. Cabal, horrified by what he's become, and realizing that Kano is the one that armed all of these creatures and is responsible, decides to cut ties with the Black Dragons permanent-like and beat the ever-living hell out of Kano. And this is a great fight to begin with because they have a long history together. This is his past coming back to both grant him new power, to tempt him, and he finally shuts the door on that. So it's good storytelling there, even if the dialogue is, Mortal Kombat-y, and there's only so much storytelling and cinematics we can do with the level of technology and focus the game is willing to give to its narrative at this time. Well, he takes Kano hostage while beginning to realize that there are some benefits to whatever Kano did to him. So he's starting to go, well, I hate how I look, but there might be a plus on the Flash. His first idea is to try and assassinate Shao Kahn and just end this, which is a little bit of his old self popping back in. Kano tries to tell him, you don't have a chance, but he tries anyway. Well, he quickly realizes that's not going to work out when he sees Shao Kahn surrounded by his allies, and he has to fight in a 2-on-1 match that could have been anyone. It didn't have to be who it was. I think it was Melina and Noob. Who cares? The fight could have been anyone else. It doesn't add anything narratively. It was just a battle before he escapes through the portal after realizing he couldn't defeat Shao Kahn. Well, okay. Nothing new there. Didn't add anything. That fight didn't really work. He could have just disappeared back to the normal realm or done some more interesting things behind the scenes, like try and blow up the munitions of the Tarkatans. which I think would have been a better way to go about it. He was once a black market arms dealer, so he goes and uses that knowledge to try and undo the damage the organization he worked for and helped build did. That would be much more thematically appropriate. Still, we get a much better fight afterwards with Cyber Sub-Zero, another corrupted, formerly good character. Well, he defeats Cyber Sub-Zero, and then Shiva shows up going, "Why do you attack your own?" "Well, these aren't my own." He defeats Shiva fairly handily. This is her last appearance in the game, and I don't know why Shiva is the level boss here. There were some very poor choices for characters for Cabal to fight, and their narrative importance here is largely minimal. Really, I think Cyber Sub-Zero should have been the boss because of the corruption, because of the technological link between the two. They're both made with Lin Kuei tech, and because it is Cabal's chapter that leads to them recovering Cyber Sub-Zero. Smoke shows up with the rest of the team, or, well, some of the team at the very least, and while Cabal has slowly been accepting what he's now capable of and that he can do good with this, he still views himself as a horrible monster, and when he learns that Sub-Zero has been turned against his will, he presses for them to save Sub-Zero, saying, "Yeah, we should help him if we can." His experiences allow him empathy for others, particularly for those who share experiences like his own. So his new experiences aren't making him a worse person and making him go into bad habits. They're making him better, which is doubly important. We also learn that he cares a lot for Stryker, and that is good to know character-wise. So we move on. And this is the Cyber Sub-Zero chapter, which I love because it allows us to basically have a Mortal Kombat superhero story. He wakes up, "Oh my gosh, I was awake through the entire thing. I was aware of what I was doing. This is terrible. Well, we've got to make it right. I can infiltrate the other side and try and deal with this." Meanwhile, this is really the best they've got. Raiden's beginning to fragment a little bit, and we see that there is a growing rift between him and Liu Kang because Raiden doesn't really have a plan anymore, and Liu Kang already is a little iffy because of Kitana getting captured and taken away, and Kung Lao dying. He's beginning to doubt his god. And this is the most important ongoing story of the entire tale. Again, our protagonists are Liu Kang and Raiden. Anyway, we get taken away from them as Cyber Sub-Zero tries to infiltrate his former allies. And it starts with a real nice fight as Sector is the first villain that he has to defeat. Sector being the one that made him what he was, being the ninja that did all of this to his friends who went along with it willingly, being the incarnation of the new Cyber Initiative, having Cyber Sub-Zero pound him into the ground fits narratively and is satisfying, and works as a sort of nice battle of foils. It also shows that the Lin Kuei do have some pragmatic tactics. They have a method for detecting which units are not functioning as they should, which you'd think they'd logically have, and it allows Sub-Zero to get rid of one of the potential issues with his plan. The people that can out him are out. He learns what the big Outworld plan is, the Soulnado that's going to strip the souls from every person on Earth, and he has to stop it. He also gets to be a superhero to some captured police officers when he finds the two Shokan, the bigger men ones, and Kano ready to do some horrible things to them, and of course let the Soulnado harvest their souls. He turns on them, freezing Kano, ending his story in this game, and defeats both of the Shokan as well. Now, these next two battles with the Shokan and with Ermac don't really add much narratively. It could have been anyone, I suppose. Yes, there could be some parallel with Ermac, but I think it could have been anyone. But the final battle of the chapter is an excellent choice. You have the two brothers in the cemetery, as Cyber Sub-Zero is trying to stop the Soulnado, both of whom were corrupted from what they once were. One of whom is trying to do good, the other who has accepted his inner evil, and it's just a great pair. Excellent storytelling. Or, at the very least, as excellent as this game is going to get. Well, after that, you have the chapter switch into Nightwolf. Now, I think Cyber Sub-Zero should have been the one to end that chapter and in that story, but still, it's a rather epic way to begin Nightwolf's tale to have him defeat Quan Chi and destroy the Soulnado. Then we have him rejoin the Earthrealmers with more squabbling and trying to come up with a plan as they try and figure out, well, time travel seems to have really mucked things up. Were we meant to have things happen this way? Should we try and change the future? Should we try to ignore it? What do we do? Raiden is about 2 seconds from blue screen of death, and he decides that he has to go to the Elder Gods to make sure that this gets solved. Liu Kang tries to get him to stay, wants them to take action, is ready to turn his back on the Elder Gods, but he still, in this last moment, is ready to listen to Raiden against his better judgment, and they go off, leading Nightwolf in charge. Well, the Cyber Lin Kuei attack, and we get to see all the Warriors of Good fighting against a horde. Just not too much, and we see Nightwolf fight against the Cyber Ninjas. Not much to write home about here until Queen Sindel comes in and just lays the smack down on everyone. She comes across as impressive. She just obliterates all of the other main characters, killing all but 2 of them before she gets to Nightwolf, those 2 being Cage and Sonya Blade. Now, how she beats and kills all of them is a little ridiculous. The stiletto in the throat, that was kind of cool. But the other thing she does, I mean, she kills one person with a punch? I mean, haven't you seen the specials or X-ray moves in this game? No. It's just silly. What's more is at some point, killing more people doesn't actually make her seem more impressive. You get diminishing returns each time she does this. Couldn't we have farmed out some of these heroes to other jobbers to make them still a threat? Couldn't we have told stories of heroic sacrifice or tragic loss with some of these other characters? There are so many tales that we could have had, that could have worked, but we don't get the chance. We just do away with these excess characters so we can move into the final act, which involves their souls. It's pressing the fast forward button when they shouldn't have. Still, it does one thing, and that's make Sindel look like a badass. Well, Nightwolf goes head-to-head with her and sacrifices himself to blow her sky high, and we get the return of Liu Kang and Raiden. Now, Kitana is dying, and she is one of the ones that I do believe that Sindel must have been the one to kill, because the death of Kitana is what spirals Liu Kang into I'm done with Raiden, and that was necessary. So she was someone who had to die in this scene. The others, not necessarily so much, 1 or 2 maybe, but not all of them to one person. It's just narratively overplaying your hand and trying to hastily make it to the next chapter. Liu Kang declares he's done with Raiden's plan, that it's madness, and that he is going to solve the problem and defeat Shao Kahn, as he should as the champion. Raiden reaches his lowest point here, and he decides that he must cross lines he never thought he would to protect Earthrealm. So he goes to the Netherrealm and forces Scorpion to get Quan Chi. Is there much of a tie between Scorpion and Raiden? Not particularly, other than the fact that Scorpion allowed his thirst for vengeance to make him lose everything, and thus Raiden is a reminder of his failure. Meanwhile, Raiden seems to have even less respect for Scorpion than he did before, because Scorpion chose this servitude and chose to be ruled by vengeance. When Quan Chi appears, you have Raiden offer really sick stuff. He says straight up, I'll offer you all the souls of Earthrealmers who die in this coming conflict. All of the people that followed him, all of the people that trusted him, he's bartering their souls to hell in order to save Earth. And about the only thing that he does to justify this when he is mocked for it by Quan Chi is say, well, if I die in it, you can have mine too. So I'm willing to lay down my life same as theirs. Quan Chi then points out, well, I've already got all their souls. Shao Kahn made the same deal. You've got nothing, Thunder God. You made an attempt at this bargain, sold yourself out for nothing. He sicks the dead souls upon him, and here is where we get one of the most ridiculous fight sequences, 3-on-1. Okay. With the Revenants that does nothing but take up time. Still, Raiden beats them and flees back to the surface when he realizes what he's been missing this whole time. And it was really Quan Chi that inspired the answer. Shao Kahn must win. This is his Hail Mary plan. But in order to do this, he has to surrender Earthrealm to Shao Kahn. What's more, he's got to stop Liu Kang. So he tries to get Liu Kang to listen, tries to stop him, but Liu Kang's like, you're crazy. I've got to kill Shao Kahn and end this. Shao Kahn killed his friend. Shao Kahn was behind Sindel to kill the girl he loved, even though he's only known her, 2 days? He's pissed. So Liu Kang and Raiden have to fight. This is probably our most emotionally impactful battle, and at the end of it, Raiden kills him, causing Liu Kang to declare, "You have killed us all," as he dies. Raiden seems to break, and he surrenders to Shao Kahn, who, in a sort of bookends, starts reenacting his speech from the very beginning of the game, and proceeds to start merging the realms before he tries to kill Raiden. However, Raiden chose right, and the Mortal Kombat Elder Gods show up as golden dragons, empower him, and he kills Shao Kahn. All right, yay team, the good guys have won, but at a terrible price, and they're going to start rebuilding. What is more, it turns out this whole thing has been manipulated by Quan Chi, and worse, his master Shinnok, who is looking at things going, well, we've got all the good warriors, Outworld's leaderless. We've got a much better chance at winning this time around. Let's do it. And that's where the story ends. This is an appropriately crapsackian victory for Mortal Kombat when you stop and think about how much the main characters tend to lose in this brutal game series for every big victory they have to win. So it works, and I feel that the story between Raiden and Liu Kang was the strongest part of it. And their final battle is really, for me, the climax, even though it's deeply satisfying to kill Shao Kahn with Raiden. Overall, I think Mortal Kombat 9 has the distinction of being the first good story mode in a fighting game. And this is really the model that NetherRealm's going to use. Yes, DC versus Mortal Kombat, that laid the groundwork for this. And there have been bits and pieces of story that have linked fighting games for a long time into a sort of narrative to guide their fights, but it's been skeletal at best. And when you look at the rest of the genre, they're not even close to Mortal Kombat 9's level, much less what NetherRealm has gotten up to with its later games. So I use this as a look at what worked in this fighting game and what didn't work. And I hope you can see why I considered certain fights very important, narratively speaking, and successful, and others not so much. Before we cut off and we end Mortal Kombat 9, I would like to take a look at the ladders. The ladder endings are something I have always looked forward to and enjoyed, because I get to see the what-ifs for, well, what if this character had won? What if this character had won? What if this character had won? And that's a great time for me. I know they can't do a full story for every single character winning, like a full 10-hour story mode for each. That'd be great for me. I'd love it. But it's just not feasible. Still, we can get something and get an insight into the character. Sometimes we can lay a good joke on you or tell you a what-if story, do many different things. And this is all a part of what makes the ladder ending effective or ineffective. Ladder endings can give us insight into the character we wouldn't have gotten before, can tell us their motivations, tell us what they would really do with power or success, and sometimes it's just a joke or a scare. And you can combine these in different ways to deliver some very effective and some very ineffective ladder endings. Also, I want to look at the ladder endings to see how you should consider integrating guest characters into Mortal Kombat. We've had some great guest characters in Mortal Kombat and some terrible ones. And I think a lot of that has to do with how they play, but more importantly, how they fit into the lore of Mortal Kombat. One of these characters does not fit into it at all, and the other does a little bit and sets the standard for what will eventually become the more successful DLC characters. Let's dive into it. We'll actually start with the DLC character since I was already on that, and I want to start with the one that didn't work for me, and that was Kratos. Whether or not you like God of War, Kratos has a ladder ending and a connection to the Mortal Kombat universe that is flimsy at best. He's violent and kills people. That seems to be it. And how is he involved in Mortal Kombat? Well, a spell brought him here. Whose spell? Dunno. Why did they cast that spell? Dunno. He's just been killing people, and he kills Shao Kahn. Okay. Nothing really narratively impactful here. The only thing that I think in any way relates to his character in his previous games is the fact that two gods show up and he's surprised that they're kind to him and thank him, which, considering Kratos' experiences, is a little bit of a surprise? Suspicious, even. And they promise him a favor he intends to collect on as he disappears back to his own world. Why does this not work? For one, he has no reason to be there. He has no motivation other than to return to his own world. He just is there. What's more, even the gods thing doesn't really connect if you don't know his character from the previous games. And third, he's a console exclusive. Does not in any way encourage you to buy the game on other platforms. And I think that the writing for his ending shows that he's really tacked on. What insight does this give us into his character? None. Is there really much growth? Oh, there can be nice gods. That's it. Is there a joke here? Nope. Is it particularly scary? Nope. Is it particularly memorable? Nope. It does nothing. Adds nothing to his character. Adds nothing to the game. It's just slapped on there. It's lazy. Let's look at Freddy Krueger, who's a guest star from The Nightmare on Elm Street, unfortunately available on multiple consoles. Well, Freddy gets banished by Nightwolf back to the Dream Realm, which is where he wanted to go, and he proceeds to go on a killing spree throughout the Mortal Kombat universe, as their attempt to get rid of him makes him more powerful, especially since a lot of people now fear him since he killed Shao Kahn. Fear, as ever, is his power source. So you just banished a monster of fear with the fears of multiple realms now empowering him. Great job, Nightwolf. Well, this actually fits fairly well. We know that the character of Freddy Krueger, even in his own canon universe, is empowered by fear. What's more, we get to add to the Mortal Kombat lore by saying there's also a realm of dreams, something we could later use for another character. This makes Freddy's appearance make sense within this universe. He could exist there. He's not from another world. Well, he's not from another universe. He's just from another realm. And he provides stuff that we could use later. What's more, the reaction to him on the part of Nightwolf makes sense and it displays some new powers of Nightwolf. Overall, he fits almost seamlessly into the Mortal Kombat universe. It all works. This is the model we should use for DLC characters, not, I'm here in your world, I kill people, I don't matter or have a connection to anything, bye. It also fits with some of the themes of the main story, where good intentions cause people to make some very poor choices. Sending Freddy back to the realm of dreams where he gets his power, a very bad choice. What about those regarding the canon characters? Well, some of them actually contain full character arcs, like that of Kenshi, who goes from the brash young youth who listened to Shang Tsung and thus lost his ancestors' souls to the man who eventually picked up Sento and joined an inter-realm law enforcement group that eventually allowed him to set right his old wrongs and defeat Shang Tsung. You've got a boy-to-man story. You've got him cathartically defeating the enemy of his ancestors. He sets things right. It's a solid story, and I think overall works for him. You also have Rain, who, in contrast to the dynamic character of Kenshi, remains rather static. Rain stays a evil bastard who is treacherous and ambitious. However, he causes a lot of changes and has different reasons for being treacherous and ambitious. He turns on his homeworld because he thinks he could have more and wants to be a general. Shao Kahn doesn't give him that, so he turns on Shao Kahn. You have Raiden thinking this means Rain is good, telling him about his past, and Rain takes control of Outworld to try and start conquering again. So Rain has his arrogance reinforced and stays the bad guy. But it also tells us a lot about Rain. It reveals some of his backstory. It reveals to us what kind of person he is that we don't get to see in the game because he's a DLC character. And it shows that Raiden can be fooled, sometimes painfully easily. So overall, this adds some things and tells a dramatic story. Scarlet doesn't really tell us much other than that she is not really a leader and that she accidentally kills Shao Kahn but is still loyal to him, turns all that blood on Quan Chi, destroys the Order of Shadow or Brotherhood of Shadow, and then waits for Shao Kahn. This tells us a bit about her personality that we don't get to see in the game, but it doesn't really tell an interesting story. So at least it does one thing, but it doesn't do much else. Sonya Blade's and Cabal's tend to be what I consider some of the weakest. Sonya Blade goes all renegade and declares war on Shao Kahn, but it doesn't really tell us anything more about her. We already know she'll go renegade if she needs to, and we already know that she's a warrior. But the only thing it shows us is that she sees visions of her dead dad. Okay. Well, I guess that tells us something about her personality. Cabal, similarly, just has his mask break, and he has to threaten a guy to get it fixed so that he can be a vigilante. What did that add to his character? Absolutely nothing. Hence why I consider these among the weakest. Jade's is also pretty bad. Hers hints at a future Mortal Kombat villain, but that's about all. It doesn't tell us anything about her, why that Mortal Kombat villain is tied to her, and Mortal Kombat 11 doesn't even seem to answer those questions, and I don't even know if that villain was Kronika. I've gotten some mixed messages on that. It's not clear. So there's a story thread here, but it never goes anywhere in the latter, so pretty weak. On the other hand, you have Johnny Cage, who's at first seems very similar. He discovers that he's got a secret power, but this actually influences Mortal Kombat 10's main story and provides something for us to use later. The latter endings, and this is important, can be a good place to test flight ideas that will appear in later games. And there's some promising ideas in these latter endings I would love to see. This is one of the most simple ones. Sub-Zero's ending has him learn that his side was in the wrong, and he teams up with Scorpion in the most badass Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance ever, and they become vigilantes righting wrongs and doing good. This friendship actually does appear in canon by Mortal Kombat 11. So this seems to be our first test lie of the idea, and I think it worked out very well in this latter ending. Scorpions, on the other hand, tells us what he's going to do in 10. He's going to kill Quan Chi and, okay, get his vengeance. Good to know. Well, that gives him a satisfactory ending, but it doesn't really tell us much else other than that Quan Chi is for sure the one that killed his family, which I think we already knew, but this confirms it at least. Not quite as good as Sub-Zero's ending. Reptile's ending, however, tells us a lot about him, as he forces Shang Tsung to recreate his race. While Reptile is seemingly quite sympathetic because he's the last of his kind, we also learn that once he gets them back, he is apathetic towards the pain of his fellows as his people unleash terror upon Outworld. So maybe there's a reason they weren't still around. And he can quite quickly become the sorts of monsters that he would have hated. So Reptile does not seem the most stable. He wants for him his people, and that's it. So to his people, he's a hero, and they idolize him. But not so much for everyone else who are the prey of the Zaterans. Shiva, on the other hand, is depicted as a much more noble and heroic figure. While that she's willing to betray Shao Kahn to save her people because of his favor for the centaurs, she is willing to do a heel face turn and go and find a new homeworld. She doesn't conquer Outworld. She makes a deal to protect Earthrealm, and they give her Australia. Sure, let's send the giants to the place where all the dangerous animals are. Maybe the box jellyfish can keep them there. This is also something of an amusing joke on Australia, who banned the game after its initial release, or for its initial release. Eventually it was allowed there. So a story can tell us more about a character, show us what they would do if they would win, and tell a joke all at the same time, making Shiva's, I think, one of the strongest, as it fulfills multiple roles. You also have endings like Baraka's, which displays his loyalty to Shao Kahn as a defining character trait. You have Shang Tsung's, which shows us that Shang Tsung actually has the capacity to be the good guy, while also demonstrating that Liu Kang has the capacity to be corrupted by power and become the villain. And considering that Liu Kang's arcade ending seems to fit hand in hand with Shang Tsung's, like they're a part of the same narrative, and Liu Kang's becoming the fire god is canonized in Mortal Kombat 11, I think there's room to make Shang Tsung a hero. And I would be very interested to see a heroic necromancer or sorcerer in the games. It's an interesting idea that shows us who these characters could be if pushed a certain direction. So both of their latter endings fairly solid and a good testing ground. Melina's shows that she loves her daddy, but it doesn't really do too much. Kitana's, on the other hand, shows us a lot about both Kitana and who she could have been, and Melina and who she could have been. Not only does Kitana create the adult version of the Powerpuff Girls, she also, in this version, didn't turn on Melina. She accepts her as her sister, and we learn that Melina has the capacity for good and could have turned out to be a good person, which makes Melina a bit more tragic and causes us to look at the canon Kitana a bit differently, because if she'd reacted in a different way, maybe Melina never would have become the bad guy. So, does that mean Kitana's at fault for that? I don't know. But it provides an interesting bit of information. Cyrax seems to become basically this new timeline's version of Smoke, has a solid story where he helps defeat the Lin Kuei and becomes a defender of Earthrealm. Sector, on the other hand, is shown to be a cold bastard through and through, who murders his father and takes the medallion. Meanwhile, getting a message from his father, who's not surprised that his son killed him, that the medallion comes with a price. Good luck, but that story goes nowhere, so I'm just kind of cut off at that. Overall, the latter endings can do multiple jobs. You can have the fun ones, like Strikers, that tells us nothing about him, but allows us to make a Johnny Cage joke. You can have them float what-if stories that would make us fanboy or fangirl, like the Powerpuff Trio, and it can even float ideas before they become canon, like Fire God Liu Kang and the alliance between Scorpion and Sub-Zero. There's a lot of room to work with. You can also cut out ideas that don't seem to work, like Kano becoming a computer virus and Jax becoming a protective computer server, and they have a cyber warfare battle. Just doesn't do too much. You can even have room for horror, like you can with Nightwolf becoming a werewolf and infecting many people, or Cyber Sub-Zero having Shao Kahn's soul possess him so that he can conquer the universe as a cyber god ninja. Okay, well, both could be unsettling, but both don't really go anywhere. And quite honestly, after Nightwolf's Mortal Kombat 9 ending, I would have liked to have seen a werewolf Nightwolf in 11 instead of the revamped version we got, who's still rather boring. But alright, we still got something. Sindel's ending is interesting in that it shows that she was benevolent and could rule well. She also can show us that Edenia could survive separate from Outworld. Gerard's, or should I say, well, Ermac's ending also helps us understand some things about Ermac, who's in Ermac, that one personality can come out dominant, and that Ermac can gestalt into I instead of we. So there's a fun bit of knowledge and what if there. Overall, I think the latter endings are a great place to play around and should still be considered a key component of story that you have to craft with purpose in mind and craft carefully. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this look at Mortal Kombat 9, and, well, that you have a very nice day. Take care.